When you multiply a number, it becomes bigger. So say for example, you multiplied 1 by 5, you would end up with 5 lots of 1. The number has become 5 times bigger. So when you multiply a number by 10, it becomes 10 times bigger. So say for example, I had a 2 ones, and I multiplied that by 10, I would end up with 20 ones, and obviously 20 ones we would write as 20. The same would happen if I had 300 and I multiplied it by 10, I would end up with 10 lots of 300, which would actually give me 3,000. Now we're going to use that information to help us calculate the questions above that have decimal points. So we're going to start with 325.8, so I'm just going to record that down here, 325.8, and the 0.8 is the 8/10ths that we have here in the tenths column, so the decimal point would be here. Now, as we know, we've just seen the pattern that as a number is multiplied by 10 times bigger, it moves into the next place value column. So using that information, if I'm multiplying 325.8 by 10, each digit is going to move one place value column. So the 3 would move to here, the 2, the 5, and then the 8, which would leave us with 3,258.0. Now when we end up with 0.0 and there's nothing after it, we don't bother with the 0.0, we remove that, so we end up with 3,258. Write that here, 3,258. Okay, so we're going to use the same method here with 4.56. So instead of using the place value columns at the bottom here, I'm going to label my place value columns. So these are ones, decimal point, and I've got tenths and hundredths. And I'm multiplying by 10, so I am going to write my place value columns down here. So I've got ones, tens, and then I've got my tenths and my hundredths, and I'm going to write that number in. So I've got 4.56. Now as the numbers move around the decimal point, this would move to here, so this would be that, this would move to here, the decimal point remains in the same place, and then this moves to here, so we end up with 45.6, so 45.6, become 10 times bigger. And then if we were to play the same process to 0.72, we would end up with 7.2. The 0 that we have here would move into a tens column, and as such it wouldn't need to be there because we would now have a 1. There'd be 7 ones in the ones column, so it shows us that we end up with 7.2. We don't need to write 7.2. Right, so using the same things we've just been doing on the previous part of the video, we're now multiplying by 100. So where before the numbers would move one place value column because they were being multiplied by 10, when they're being multiplied by 100, 10 times 10 is 100, so they actually move 2 place value columns multiplied by 100. So just to demonstrate what that looks like, let's use the number that we've got up here, so 325, so 325.8. The digits are all going to move 2 place value columns, so this would be 1, 2, so it would end up here, and then 1, 2 would end up here, 1, 2 ends up in the hundreds column, and 1, 2 would end up in the tens column. Now we don't just leave the number like that, the decimal point will be here, we don't need to put that in, but I'm just showing you that that means that actually what we've got here is the ones column is empty, so we do need to put a 0 in there to show that each of these digits have moved along and that we currently have nothing now in the ones column. So here we end up with 32580, so 32,580. Let's use that same method here. So I've got ones, tenths and hundredths, and I am going to be multiplying them by 100, so I'm moving each number 2 place value columns. So let's label those place value columns. So I've got ones, tens, hundreds, and then my tenths, my hundredths, and I'm going to write that number in there. So I have got 4.56, and those numbers are going to move. So 1, 2 would move to here, 1, 2 would move to here, and then 1, 2 would move to here. So I end up with, see the decimal point would be there, so I don't need to put that 0, it would be 456. And then for the final question here, using the same method, the digits would move 1, 2 around the place value column. So you can see you would end up with 72. Now here we're multiplying by 1,000, so you may have noticed a pattern already. When we multiply by 10, the digits all move one place value column. When we multiply by 100, they move two place value columns, and here where we're multiplying by 1,000, they move three place value columns, because 10 times 10 times 10 equals 1,000. And one of the quickest ways to remember how many place value columns the digits need to move is to look at how many zeros there are in the multiple. So 1,000 has 3 zeros. So let's start with the number. So the number we have is 325.8. We're going to multiply that number by 1,000, so it's going to do 1, 2, 3 jumps, because 10 times 10 times 10 is the same as times by 1,000. Okay, so that means this number here, this 300, is going to move 1, 2, 3 into this column here, 1, 2, 3 into this column here, 1, 2, 3 into this column here, and finally 1, 2, 3 into this column here. Now, if they were there would be zeros in these columns. We don't put them in because, again, we would have incredibly long numbers if we put all the zeros on either side of the numbers that we actually have. If they were there, though, you would see that this would also move 1, 2, 3, and it would go here, and then 1, 2, 3, and it would go here. So you end up with 325,800. So 325,800. Now when we apply that same method, so we've got our ones, tenths, hundredths. I'm going to label those down here. So ones, tenths, hundredths, tens, hundreds, thousands, and the number that I have is 4.56. I'm going to do those jumps. So 1, 2, 3 would end up here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then if there was a zero there again, it'd be 1, 2, 3, which would go in here. So you would end up with 4,560. Now, if you were to apply the same thing to the final question, 0.72, this would jump 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you'd have a 7, 2, and then your zero would be here. So you end up with 720.